Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. RC. The number to call is 469 795 8580. The number again is area code 469 795 8580. Today, our featured guest is Miriam Goodman, and she has written a latest book, Too Much Togetherness Surviving Retirement as a Couple. And her earlier book is Reinventing Retirement 389 Bright Ideas About Family, Friends, Health, and What to Do and Where to Live. Miriam, welcome to Dallas Live.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
All right, very good. Miriam, I was reading through you have accomplished quite a bit in your life, and two things that immediately brought me to the attention were your interviews with Margaret Mead and Marilyn Chambers. Now,
Right.
tell me, how was it like interviewing Margaret Mead?
It was really wonderful experience. She was staying with her sister in Los Angeles, and I went to Los Angeles to meet her. And I'm not from there. I wasn't familiar with the street, so I parked about four houses away. Once I got on the street, and I was walking down the street, and I got to the door, and they opened the door immediately. They said, "Well, we knew it had to be you because nobody ever walks in this town." I
Okay.
thought it was pretty funny. She was lovely. She was quite advanced in age when I met her, but she was full of vim and vigor and very interested in what was happening with women today. I had a feminist radio show, and that was how I happened to interview her. And she was. It was great. It was great to meet these people. I had heard about all my life, and she was very interesting.
Oh, okay. What was the subject matter of your conversation with her?
Um, it was so long ago.
Okay.
I just her work. Basically, it was about her work and struggles she might have had as as a woman in the field. There weren't so many women anthropologists, and what she found in different cultures. That's what I remember. But I have to tell you, it was 30 years ago or more. So
Oh, okay, no
40,
problem.
a long time ago.
All
So I
right,
don't
no.
really remember.
All right, now the next one I wanted to ask you about Marilyn Chambers. Now, isn't the same adult movie actress?
That's exactly who it was. Yes, yes, and that was pretty funny because it was radio, and of course nobody can see you, like our interview today. And I went into her house, and she had rollers in her hair. Again, this was 30 some years ago when women used to use these huge rollers, and she didn't care. She was sitting in the house. She didn't care what she looked like, and she was a very pretty woman, and she was very sweet, almost innocent is what I remember about her. And her husband was there. He sort of came in and out of the room, and that was it. And it was just an interesting interview about why she did what she did and what her career was and where she might be going. He actually, when I say her husband came in and out of the room, I felt that she was very protected. I know they had all kinds of alarms around the house, and every kind of the latest technology at that day in terms of anybody breaking in or eavesdropping or anything like that.
Oh yeah, well, apparently every man in America knew about her, but that's a different
Exactly.
story.
Yes.
I was going to go ahead and play one of your interview on KRON TV. Let's listen to this.
Okay.
Sounds like golfing weather, folks. That's right. Those of you who are retired, who dream about spending your whole life pursuing your passions, enjoying your life with your spouse or partner. Well, guess what, folks? It ain't as simple as it sounds. Let me introduce you to Miriam Goodman. She wrote the book Reinventing Retirement, and she is just about to release a new book called Too Much Togetherness. The name says it, but could you please explain what you mean by too much togetherness?
Well, the subtitle is Surviving Retirement as a Couple. And what I mean is that people don't really think about how much time you're going to be spending together as a couple after retirement. Each of you has had a to-do list for the last 40 years or so, and you've had other responsibilities, your children, your family, your work, and all of a sudden, there you are confronted with each other 24 hours a day, and you haven't.
All right, Miriam, if I just
Yeah.
keep playing that, then there is no job for me.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so anyway, I was showing your video to our video audience, and you look pretty good there. So you said that we are having a radio interview, but we are also having this video simultaneous video streaming, so they
Ah,
are
I
able
didn't
to
know
see
that.
you right there. So our video
Okay.
audience have a pretty good idea how you look and how you speak. Looks like you have a considerable experience in doing the radio and TV shows, as I can see it.
That's true. I started out. Oh gosh. I started out. I was and I still am a public relations consultant. But I was the president of a women's organization called National Women's Political Caucus, and it had been formed in the early 70s to encourage women to run for office. So I was president of the San Francisco chapter, and one of the members came up to me and she said, feminism is so misunderstood. People don't really know what it is. They think it's a bunch of crazy ladies burning bras. They don't really understand. She says, I think we should make a television show explaining what it is to the people who are confused. So I said, great idea. And then I started to think about television is so complicated. You've got to have your directors, your producers, your everything else. As radio, you can just have your tape recorder and go out and do it and, connect with the station. And, well, I don't have to tell you that. It's so much easier now. But still, we decided to do a radio show instead. And what I remember is I sent out a proposal to about 25 radio stations in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I got an answer back from a few, and from one of them, the guy said, well, what's your problem? I said, there are no women on the air. Again, nobody remembers that. I said, there are no women on the air. And this guy, who was head of a big, important station, goes over to his console, pushes a button, and there's a woman's voice giving the call letters for the station.
Okay.
And he said, see, we do have women on the air. And that was it.
That was it.
Yeah, and I got another station that was interested in the show. I was able, I had a concept for a show, and the guy said, great, when do you want to do it? So I started, back in those days, there were still public affairs programs, so the FCC required it. So I did the show once. The show was rebroadcast on their FM station late that night. Somebody in Spokane, Washington, which is more than 1,000 miles away from here, heard the show because this station had a very strong signal. He called the station the next day and he said, I'm being sued by women in this town because we don't have any women on the air. He says, do you think I could buy that show? And that started my whole career.
Ah.
Figuring out that other people, were interested in this kind of thing. So I started syndicating it myself. I sold it to stations all over the country, and NPR was just starting at that time. And I would take the interviews, like the interview with Margaret Mead, let's say, or anyone else, and sort of recut it. Again, I could do that because it was tape recorder. I didn't have to deal with the union and anything else because I was doing it myself. And sell those same interviews to NPR, to Australian broadcasting, to Canadian broadcasting. And I created a career for myself as a radio producer. And while I was doing that, I was approached to become a television producer. And I said, I don't know anything about that. And they said, sure you do. It's the same as doing radio. So I said, okay. And I became a television producer.
Wow.
And it was crazy. And it was for Newsweek magazine at the time owned a TV service.
Mm-hmm.
And I became their producer in San Francisco. And a lot of things were going on here. Ronald Reagan was running for president, and President Ford got shot here, and Patty Hearst was kidnapped. And there were a lot of things going on in the Bay Area, and it was easy for me to get into the television. I had a crew, of course, who knew much more about the fine art of television than I did, but they were very helpful. Then I went to work at a television station in San Francisco as a documentary producer, and realized all along that radio was really much more interesting to me than television. And I eased myself out of television, went back to radio, kept my career in public relations. And then when my daughter was about 2, I noticed that Sesame Street was too fast moving for her. I don't know if you remember that everybody used to compare Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and
Yes, I know
Sesame
that show
Street
very
as-
well. Yeah, he's no longer there, of course.
So Mr. Rogers was slow and mellow, and the kids could sit and watch it. And Sesame Street, even though you don't think of it as that frenetic, you know, they'd be in the middle of talking about the letter, this is the letter C, and this is all the things that start with C. And then 20 seconds later, you'd see Oscar, you know, or one of the other puppets doing something. And I remember my daughter thinking, well, you know, I wanted to see more of Oscar. Why did they change it again to the letters or the numbers, or what was happening with this? And I thought, you know, I'm going to make a video for kids.
Uh-huh.
So I made a video for children on how to listen to music and how to listen to the beat and what the instruments are. And I worked with a music teacher in San Francisco, and I made a video called Toddler Tunes and Tales that I sold, I have to say, mostly to grandparents because, you know, it was in the higher end, and not everybody had VCRs then. You know, so I was selling it in children's stores and selling it through direct mail and everything, and it was very interesting. But again, I missed radio, and I was taking a class. And this is more than we need to know, but I was taking a class on the history of the American musical. Yeah, so this man was what? Yes. Okay. Yeah, well, it was mostly. This guy was teaching a class on the history of the American musical, and I went up to him after class, and this was a class of 300 or 400 people, and I just introduced myself, and I said, you know, your stuff should be on the radio. I said, this is so interesting. People, you know, there are people who are interested in this history and how it relates to American history and music and everything. I said, if you would like to do a radio show, I'd like to produce it for you. So we found a station that took us, and I did that for several years. I produced his radio show on the American musical, and that was a lot of fun. Then, well, I don't know what happened, but I started talking to people. I think my parents retired, and then people I knew, their parents were retiring, and people started complaining that they didn't think their parents were doing it right, and we as boomers think we have to invent everything ourselves, and we have to do it right. So I started talking to women whose husbands were basically getting close to retirement, women whose husbands maybe were a few years older than the women themselves, and they all said, oh my God, my husband can't retire. He won't know what to do with himself. He'll drive me crazy. He'll drive himself crazy. You know, I'm not going to let him retire. I remember people saying things like that. And I thought, you know, this is really interesting because retirement, everybody talks about money. Do you have enough money? You know, where are you going to live if you have enough money? Are you going to vacation? Are you going to? Nobody talks about the emotional, the psychological changes that people go through in retirement. And this is a major, major change, mentally, emotionally. And I looked around, and there was absolutely no research. Nobody was talking about it. The most they could ever say is, well, whatever kind of person you were in your work life, that's the kind of person you're going to be in your retirement. And I could look around me and see that that wasn't true. You know, there were people who were type A, go-getters in their work life and retired. They just became couch potatoes, depressed, didn't know have any get up and go, didn't know what to do. And I thought, there's a book here. So I went and wrote it. Okay. You're absolutely right. You said it perfectly. Yes. Okay.
First you were afraid, you were petrified, kept thinking you'd be working here until the day you died. But then you spent so many nights thinking how your life should be, so you grew strong, and you learned how to say so long. So now we're here to let you know, you worked your final year and now it's time for you to go. 230 days a year, and now you're ready to go play, but we will miss you in so many, many ways. Now go, walk here so sad and blue, but just remember, no more VLCs for you, and so you're gone. Unplug the phone. Tell Mary Alice not to schedule no more hearings, 'cause you're gone. Sit back, relax, sip some wine and watch TV. Best of all, finally, no more set meetings for me. Hey, hey. So now go, walk out the door. Don't turn around now, 'cause you don't work here anymore. Now we're the ones who gathered here so sad and blue, but just remember, no more VLCs for you. So you're gone. Unplug the phone. Tell Mary Alice not to schedule no more meetings, 'cause you're gone. Sit back, relax, sip some wine and watch TV. Best of all, finally.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a great song. That's yeah. Well, that's through the magic of electronics. You can do that. That's absolutely right. Yes, I told you the story of like, oh yeah, we've got women on the air. Not exactly true. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Mm. I think it is. You know, I mean, everything that I'm going to say, I have to say, it doesn't apply to everyone. Some people are having a fabulous retirement. You know, some people keep up and do whatever they need to do. But you know, a lot of people, they don't prepare for retirement because to them, retirement and death are the same thing. And nobody wants to say that. You know, it's they worry. What about frailty? What about this? I mean, I went for a walk this morning with a friend whose husband needs heart surgery. He's 72. And she says, oh, when I get home, I'm going to call the surgeon and set up an appointment. He won't even call to talk to the doctor. He's so scared about what might, I mean, anybody should be scared of surgery, of course, but he's really worried about it. How is he going to be afterwards? Now he's a big hiker, and you know, he loves to go out and do things, and they travel a lot. But what's going to happen? And who's going to take care of me? That's the other thing that nobody wants to talk about. You know, my book is called Too Much Togetherness, and young people say, oh, there's no such thing as too much togetherness. I want to be with my partner, with my loved one all the time, you know. That's great. But you aren't, because you each have jobs, you have other responsibilities and things like that. And nobody really knows what it's like except 3 weeks a year when you're on vacation together. That's the only time you really are together 24 hours a day without any distractions. And it's a really difficult adjustment. Nobody prepares you for it. You know, my feeling is that everything else in our lives, we've sort of had somebody help us through, or there's someone to warn us about the changes. I mean, if you remember when you were a child, your parents got you ready psychologically for school before you ever went to school. Oh, you're going to go to school, and there's going to be so many other children for you to play with, and there's going to be a nice teacher, and you're going to have toys, and you're going to learn to read. You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
You get all this preparation, and then before you go to high school, you probably have a neighbor, a cousin, a sibling who's already been in high school, and they sort of set you up for it, makes you know what it's like, or you find out what work is like, or you find out what marriage is like, or what parenting is like. You know, it's never the same for you as it is for the person just a little bit ahead of you, but you have an idea.
Correct.
When it comes to retirement, who are you going to look to? I mean, you're not looking to your father, right?
No, I'm not.
Where's your role model?
Yes. Good question.
So, I think, again, I said, baby boomers think that they have to reinvent everything themselves, but the truth is, you have to sit down before you retire. You have to discuss with your partner, how do you see your retirement? How do I see my retirement? Are we on the same page? Those are really important questions.
Okay, so the husband and wife, long before they are going to reach their retirement age, has to sit down and communicate what is the life is going to be after retirement, because there may be different expectations from the husband versus wife.
That's right.
And they haven't talked about it. Okay. What are the things that you noticed, by dealing with your interviews with the people who are about to retire or retired? What is the disconnect between them? Have you noticed any of those? The disconnect being that the husband is expecting something and he's expecting her to sit at home with him, or she says, wait a minute, I don't want to do this.
Right. That's part of it. But, here's the deep, dark secret. Nobody wants to tell the other person, I don't want to be with you 24 hours a day.
Ah.
You can sit and have this wonderful open conversation, and you can say to your wife, I don't want to move. I want to stay here and be near the grandchildren and old familiar things. And she might say, well, I've always dreamed of living at the seashore, and I want to go, live at least part of the year somewhere, and maybe you could take up fishing, or if we would go do, you can talk about things in the abstract, but nobody is going to sit down and say, I'm afraid I would get bored with you. I just don't. I have my own things. I want it differently, and it's a very difficult conversation to have. But my favorite story, I have to tell you, I was interviewing this couple, and the husband had recently retired. He had been an engineer, and he had some virus which attacked his vocal cords, and he couldn't talk any louder than a whisper anymore. And it was very difficult for him to work and not be able to communicate with his coworkers, et cetera. So he retired. So they had a big party for him on Friday night, and everybody, was very complimentary, and everything was wonderful. Monday morning, the woman's getting dressed, and the husband comes into the bedroom, and he says, what are you doing? And she says, well, it's Monday. It's my tennis day. And he said, but I retired.
Oh.
They had never had a conversation.
Right.
And this was a couple that thought they were very open with each other, had great communication skills, blah, blah, blah. They had never talked about it. What did he expect? What did she expect? He obviously expected her to give up everything and spend all the time with him. She thought life was going to go on and he was going to find his own things to do. So it really is important to have the conversation, but with that secret in the back of your mind that maybe one or both of you doesn't want to spend the other 24 hours a day with the other person.
Well, that's very true. As a matter of fact, the break between the husband and wife actually spices things up. Now, in your book, you talk about 5 types of retired men. Can you tell our audience who they are?
Sure. The first one, I have them. I don't remember what order I put them in, but
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay. So I found that there's a guy I call the ghost, and he kind of disappears. Either he's watching TV, sitting at the computer, in the bedroom sleeping, doesn't want to go anywhere, doesn't want to do anything. He's just like a ghost. He's not there anymore. Then there's the guy I call the general. he's in full battle gear. He's telling you what to do. Oh, you mean this is the way you load the dishwasher? No, you've been doing it wrong for 40 years. I know a better way to do it. Oh, this is the way you drive to the supermarket? Oh, this is the wrong route to take. You should have gone this way.
That sounds like me.
Uh-oh. Yeah, okay. So, there's the general, the ghost. Then there's the one that I call the glommer.
Okay.
There's an expression, somebody gloms onto you. If you remember, if you had children, how when they're little, just learning to walk, 1 and 2, they grab onto your leg all the time, and you can barely walk from one room to the next without this child hanging on you.
Right.
Well, sometimes the husband becomes the same way. He doesn't want to go anywhere without her. Whenever she goes, she's going to lunch with her friends. Oh, can I come? It's like he doesn't have an individual life. He sees himself as only attached to this person. And I'm sorry to be sexist and say it's just men. There's some women who are like that as well.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I mean, I know men are worse in this because I have seen, especially it seems, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, men seems to be affected more by this retirement than women.
Well, they do. They are because they, by and large, they've been involved in their work life, and they haven't really thought about what's going to happen next. They don't have. They define themselves by their job or their position or their title, and when they don't have that anymore, what are they supposed to do?
Right.
They haven't thought about what comes next, and we all have to think about what comes next. And as I said at the beginning, we can say, well, we don't want to think about what comes next because what comes next is death. We have to think about we might be alive and retired for the next 30 years.
Correct.
Because we're living so much longer, we're healthier, we know what to do. And, are you going to spend 30 years watching TV? Are you going to spend 30 years, sitting at your computer and playing computer games? Even though some of those computer games are sort of designed to keep your brain active, you still need to get up. You need to get out. You need to be part of the world.
Right.
And that's what happens with so many people. They don't just withdraw from themselves. They withdraw from the world. And that's not very interesting to your partner.
Absolutely. See, you said it right, because men been working for 45 years. All they got is their job. And when they're retired, they got nothing else to do. Now they're completely lost. And probably that's what happened to my dad. He was, completely lost and got depressed. Now, women, on the other hand, they work, they're multitasking, right? They are caregiving.
Exactly. So they work, they take care of the children, they take care of the home, maybe they take care of elderly parents or other relatives, they volunteer, they have friends. So if they have 10 things on their plate and working is one of them, then they still have those 9 things left. The men don't have anything else.
All right. Very, very, very interesting point. The time is running very fast here. We have to come to the second break. Miriam, please stay on the line. Ladies and gentlemen,
Sure.
We are listening to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. Ravi, and it's a very pleasure to listen to what Miriam has to say. Her 2 books are Too Much Togetherness, Surviving Retirement as a Couple, and the earlier book is Reinventing Retirement, 389 Bright Ideas. And apparently, if you just implement one idea per day, it will take more than a year to get this all done.
That's true.
All right.
That's true.
The number to call is 469-795-8580, 8580. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. Ravi. You are listening to our featured guest, Miriam Goodman. She has written 2 books. The latest one is Too Much Togetherness, Surviving Retirement as a Couple, and the earlier book is Reinventing Retirement. Both books are available at Amazon.com and wherever books are sold. Miriam, welcome back to our third segment.
Oh, thank you. And I just to add to what you just said, if you go to the bookstore and you ask for Too Much Togetherness, they may not have it on the shelf, but they can get it for you in a couple days.
Yes. Okay.
Easy to order. So it's just, ask for Too Much Togetherness and they can get it for you. And it's only $10.
All right.
End of my ad. Yeah.
Oh.
We didn't finish talking about the 5 different kinds of men.
Yes, I was actually going to come back to it because I was going to ask about the gypsy.
Yeah, the gypsy.
And the grump.
This is a guy, and I know one of these guys. He's on the move all the time. He's wanting to travel all the time. He just has to go. He can't stand sitting still. He can't stand being at home because he might turn into that ghost, I guess. So he's always planning trips. And his wife is exhausted because as soon as she comes home, does the laundry, he wants to get up and go someplace. And it's just that they're really avoiding dealing with the reality of not working anymore.
Uh-huh.
And this for them is they do these wonderful plans. They go online. They find the hotels and the tour guides and the flights and all the things you need, and which he probably didn't do before he retired. He probably had somebody do that for him. And now he's finding all these deals and everything, and they're constantly on the go. And it's very hard on the wife because she has a social network that she wants to maintain, and if she's in and out of town all the time, she never can see her friends or make plans ahead of time. And I remember I interviewed one couple where the woman was really a full-time volunteer, and she was on the board of 2 important organizations, and both of them were having big gala benefits.
Mm-hmm.
One was in April and one was in May, and she was involved. She was the chair of one and the vice chair of the other, and she was really, really involved. And about 2 months before the first big event, her husband comes home and he says, "Look, honey, I bought us tickets on a cruise. It's an 8-week cruise." And she says, that I'm involved in these, and I'm sure she came home every night and told him about the plans.
Right.
This is what she'd done. And this was his denial that she had a life, that he was saying, "Oh, look, I bought us tickets on a cruise." And now you can't do your thing. So, it's really, that's who the gypsy is to me, is the guy who would rather travel than deal with the reality of being home and in a new phase of his life.
My goodness.
And I guess, and the last one, I guess a little bit of all those other ones include this, and this is the one I call the grumbler. He's grumbling when you go out with your friends. He grumbles when you make dinner. All of a sudden his favorite dish isn't his favorite dish anymore. Why aren't you doing this? Always complaining about something. So, if you think about it, each of these guys is carrying a bit of depression with them. And that's really the key, because depression is a serious medical condition, and it's not, I'm not talking about you feeling upset one day or another, because something has gone wrong or you've lost a friend or something like that. I'm talking about depression with the capital D. And, therapists, by and large, are not used to dealing with men who are depressed. The typical depressed patient is a woman.
Right.
And all of a sudden, there's these hundreds and thousands of depressed men, and nobody's quite sure what to call it. Nobody's quite sure when it becomes chronic, when it means, he needs help. And, is it just because he's sleeping all the time? Is he irritable? Is he anxious? All these things that are signs of depression. But, do you have to put them together? The spouse isn't necessarily trained to notice what's going on. And one woman told me that she noticed how depressed her husband was, and he kept saying, no, I'm not. And she says, every time we go to somebody's house, you fall asleep. Every time we go to a lecture, you fall asleep. This is not good. You've got to do something. So he said, okay, I'll go see someone, fine. And she said, hold on, I'm going with you. He said, what do you mean? I'm going to the therapist. This is my private time. I'm going to be able to talk about things. And she says, I'm going with you on this first appointment because you're going to lie to the therapist. The therapist's going to say to you, how are things going? You're going to say, oh, they're fine.
That's
Does this sound familiar?
it sounds very familiar. Yes. Yeah.
So if she says, I have to be there, to tell the truth. I have to get the conversation, out there and explain what's happening with you, so that then you can have the therapy alone and you can work on the issues. But, I'm just afraid you're not going to be completely honest with your therapist, and I need to be there with you. So that's one approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
I think they will try to hide everything, and finally the psychiatrist or the psychologist would be wondering, well, this guy sounds pretty good, because they're going to make an act over there. When no man is
Right.
going to go and admit, hey, I'm depressed, please help me. Okay,
Right.
that's apparently not manliness. Okay, all right.
You
Now,
got it.
now here's the thing, though. My father, he was, I do not know, maybe looking back at it, he must have been depressed. Now, how his depression manifested itself was that he'll go and pick fight with the neighbors. Somebody walking down the street, he will just keep doing it and keep amusing himself by fighting with everybody.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, and that's the worst part, right? I mean, come
Yeah.
on, if you just go to sleep, that's one thing. Now you are creating all kinds of problem for yourself and also your family. And that's what he was doing. So we have to figure out how to do it. Now he would not go to another psychologist because he's a psychologist himself. So that was the worst part of this whole deal. Okay, very good. Now coming back to your scenario here, so they have to start planning this, and when do they plan, and how do they sit down together, and what are the issues they have to bring up open in the table?
Well, I can't tell you how to sit down as a couple because you have your MO. You have what's worked for you in the past. You know what works.
Right.
Some people, for example, women who are still working while their husbands are home, want them to maybe go take a class or, find other people to hang out with or whatever it is. And they've told me that different people have different plans. Like some women can say, honey, there's a community college just a few blocks away. Why don't you go down there and see what they have to offer? Other women say that would be the kiss of death. The guy would do absolutely the opposite. So she'll go and get the catalog and leave it on the table where he might pick it up. Or somebody else might call a friend of hers and is your husband doing anything? Is he driving you crazy? Maybe we could get the guys to do something together. Would your husband be willing to call my husband and ask him to, go to a baseball game or take a class together or walk together? Oh, one woman told me 4 men got together and they decided to walk. This was going to be their activity together. These 4 guys were going to walk several times a week. So each one of them went out and bought a book on walking. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was so complicated to figure out how to put one foot in front of the other, but they wanted to be sure they were doing it right.
Right.
Again, boomers have to have instructions for everything, right?
Absolutely.
So they went out. They were very funny, and they went out, and they did keep it up for a while. I think, one by one, some moved off to a retirement community or did something else, but it was really quite humorous how they figured out they couldn't walk without a book. But so what I'm saying is every couple has a method, and they have to know what to do. But if you're going to sit down and have a conversation, the first thing you have to remember, if it's the woman starting a conversation or the man, is that the other person is vulnerable. They're sort of in a weakened state. They don't have that framework of their job around them anymore. Their self-image. So it doesn't work to try to to reason with them. You have to talk more about feelings. How do you feel about this? Reasoning doesn't always work in a situation like this because they're so vulnerable. And then the person who's in the conversation has to admit that she is feeling vulnerable as well. Maybe they have to ask the other person for help. Maybe they have to talk about their emotional issues. Maybe the woman has been caring for his parents. She has to say, maybe we should go together. It's not just me here alone anymore. And when you see the symptoms of sleep deprivation maybe, or too much sleeping, or laziness, or you notice that he's walking down the street so much slower than he used to, or he has no initiative, don't try to cure everything at once. take one symptom at a time and see how you can deal with it. And remember, you're a team. That's why even if this guy was appalled that his wife wanted to go to the therapist with him, this is something that's affecting both of them. So if you go to the appointment with him, that not only are you sharing your observations in front of him, with the doctor, but you're finding out what you can do to help too.
Okay.
And then, the last thing is if you feel that you're doing okay and your partner isn't, that doesn't mean that you should not necessarily get therapy yourself, because sometimes if you get a little expert help, it can help both of you.
Very good. Now, another thing that you talked about is the divorce rate. The people who are married for more than 20 years, the divorce rate is much higher. Is that how does that play into the retirement? Because the husband and wife are raising children. She's working, he's working, and the children are growing up, and years have been passing by. 10, 20 years have passed, and then suddenly all the kids have gone out of the house and they are empty nesting, but still both of them have a job. And then the retirement comes, and then the next day they look at each other. Is this the woman or man I married? Is that how it starts? Because they haven't communicated at all.
Well, especially if you've both been out there in the world, you've changed.
Yes.
And maybe you haven't changed the same way. And, or maybe you were sort of going along to get along and figuring, well, I'll deal with myself once the kids are gone, or they're out of the house, or I've stopped working, or whatever it is. And that there are a lot of problems that have been there all along that people have kind of sublimated until they could get to the point where they think, okay, now I want to deal with it. And it's so much different now financially for women. In the past, a lot of women stayed in an unhealthy relationship because they didn't have any of their own money, and they didn't know how they would survive unless they stayed married. And now, I hope in all 50 states and in many foreign countries as well, women have the rights to half the income.
Right.
And the pension and anything else. So they feel more empowered that, the woman who 20 years ago maybe never would have left now feels I can leave because there's enough money, and I have shown myself that I can make it in the world. I've had a career. I've raised children. I've done all these things. So the women don't feel quite so weak anymore. So they can go off and do it. And from the research I've done, people think, oh, well, the guy just wants to go get a young trophy wife.
Right.
That isn't the truth at all. It's more often than not, it's the woman who wants out, and the men are blown away. They had no idea their wives are unhappy because they were just kind of oblivious.
Absolutely.
And so, if you see a couple getting divorced, it's not because he's got a young honey on the side. It's because the two of them together have realized they're not the people they were when they married. Their interests have changed, their desires have changed, and their needs have changed.
Oh, absolutely right. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Miriam Goodman. She has written 2 books, Too Much Togetherness, the latest, and the earlier one is Reinventing Retirement. If it is not available, you can always find it in Amazon.com. Is it available as a Kindle version, Miriam, the Too Much Togetherness?
Yes, they are both available as ebooks. Yeah.
Okay, now, I have never been to a bookstore lately. I buy every book. Well, I do go to bookstore, but not to buy anything, because whenever I want to read something, I don't have the patience to, drive my car to the nearest bookstore. I just place it on Kindle, and as a matter of fact, the advantage of electronic books, as you know, you're not burning some trees, and it's immediate. So
that's right. It is immediate. That's true.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. Ravi. Miriam, please stay on the line. We will go to the final segment. Now, there's going to be some other music. Of course, this music will be replaced later on by commercials. So let's listen to this music, and we'll be right back in 2 minutes.
I worked my butt off all my life. Had big plans to retire. Maybe play a little golf, go fishing. Maybe just hang out there by the fire. They say take responsibility. That's the way you need to be. Then one day the stock market took a crap, and all my savings got cut in half. I'm on a redneck retirement plan. I play the lotto every chance I can. Big spins, scratchers, and Powerball. Lord have mercy, I've played them all. They say I need to diversify. My 401k just got up and said goodbye. Now there's nothing left for me, so I have to play the lottery. Well, we pray for the poor, and the rich all get their thrill. But you and me know it's the middle class that ends up paying the bill. I don't have stock in AT&T. I'm afraid I invested in Social Security. And by the time my gold watch comes along, I heard that money's gonna be all gone. I'm on the redneck retirement plan. I play the lotto every chance I can. Powerball, scratchers, and megabucks. I'll be working till I slam the lid shut. Me and my pension finally see eye to eye. I'll be working till the day I die. The only one way out for me is for me to play the lottery. They use my tax money to bail out the banks that foreclosed the loan on my house. Man, I never saw that one coming. I'm on a redneck retirement plan. I play the lotto every chance I can. Big spins, scratchers, and Powerball. Lord have mercy, I've played them all. They say I need to diversify. My 401k just got up and said goodbye. Now there's nothing left for me, so I have to play the lottery. No, there's nothing left for me, so I have to play the lottery.
Thank Well, then you got to find another volunteer activity, because you can go volunteer in a food bank, and homeless people can come in there. But if you have a conversation with someone there, it could make their whole day. Plus, there are other volunteers there who may be people that you would want to hang out with, because one of the hardest things when you get older is meeting new friends and making new friends. And you need to make new friends, because your friends are dying. Your friends are moving away. Your friends have other activities and things they're doing, and you can't necessarily count on the people that you've been hanging out with for the last 40 years. So, I have heard so many people, they do, literacy. A lot of people I know are going into schools and helping kids with reading. Okay, maybe that's not so intellectually stimulating for them, but they're helping. They're doing something that's helping. And that's important for a lot of people. Maybe you have job skills and someone else is starting out in your field. You can be a mentor to someone in that field. I mean, there are many things that you can do. I was in India when I was working on the book, and I met a couple who the state makes you retire at 60. They were both scientists in a college. They were both scientists in a college, and they had labs and everything. And they told me that after 5 o'clock, when everybody went home, they would sneak back to their labs to continue working on projects that they loved because they were so interested in them. They weren't getting paid. They were officially retired, but this is something they wanted to do. And I think everyone should have a passion, something that they love, and you don't wait until you're 65 to think about it. It's something, if you've had some interest, I always kid around and say that people in my generation, everybody I know wanted to be a rock musician. Whether they were a man or a woman, everybody wanted to be Elvis. So it's not too late. You can buy a keyboard, you can take lessons off your computer, you can get a couple friends together and have a band and maybe just play it for yourselves, play at parties, or maybe go to an old age home and play for them. Who knows what it is, but find something that you love and find something that interests you, and that will be your passion for the day. And then you can also go do that volunteer job at the homeless shelter or at the school or something else. You're contributing to society, giving back. That's really important. And it can't be that every single activity you have is about you. It's got to be about somebody else. Mhm. I was just touring. I was just traveling. Yeah, yeah. But it was so interesting to me to meet. The first day I was there, and my guide and I were in one of those little like rickshaws, and we're riding in a rickshaw, and he's taking me to the section of Delhi where they have all the fabrics for the saris, and he's talking. He said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, and this is this must be about 10 years ago." And he said, "Well," I said, "I'm writing this book, and I'm dealing with emotional changes." And he said, "Are you going to be on Oprah?" And I thought, here I am in Delhi, and my guide knows about Oprah. So I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, that's right. No, but the thing is, once you're, and this, in case you have any listeners or viewers who are interested in writing a book, my advice is you become so obsessed with that, you want to ask everybody what their experience is. I can meet somebody in the grocery line who tells me he's retired, and I said, "Well, how's it going for you? And what are you doing? And how is it?" Or I'll sit next to someone on an airplane. It's this kind of thing because it's become so interesting to me what people are doing and how they're dealing with it. And I'm always getting advice because I give a lot of talks on the subject, and I always want to hear people's experiences, and learn, how not to make the mistake myself or advise other people how not to make the mistake. So that's why I say if you always want to be a photographer, don't wait till you're 65. When you're 45, start taking a class. And don't ever say, "I don't have time." Maybe Saturday morning when your daughter's at gymnastics, you can go find a class. Or maybe Thursday nights, when everybody else is doing something, you can find a class. It's always something that you can do in a way to start preparing yourself, because maybe by the time you get to be 65, you've decided that isn't really what my passion is. I really don't want to be a photographer anymore. There's too many gimmicks, and there's Photoshop, and what you see is not really what you get, and you can play around with it. I'd rather do something real. I'd rather play the guitar, or I'd rather, design playgrounds. Whatever it is, something that you've always wanted to do is possible, but don't wait until you're 65 to do it. Start thinking about it earlier and do a little prep work. Hmm. Right. Means it's not Bollywood. Marilyn Chambers. I was Behind the Green Door. Was that the movie? That's great. Yeah. I guess so. I guess so. Right, right. That's funny. Mhm. Mhm. Right. I didn't ask him, but I would say it's because she was the money machine. That's it. Right. I don't know. I have no idea, but I'm sure you could Google and find out. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Okay. Well, the book that I think deals with the problems and the issues that we talked about today is Too Much Togetherness: Surviving Retirement as a Couple by Miriam Goodman. Your bookstore can order it for you, or you can get it online. The other book, Reinventing Retirement, you can get the ebook online, but the hard copies, I have them all because when my publisher had never thought about ebooks.